Imagine this. At her son's lavish wedding, Eleni Papadopoulos gets a text from the altar saying the bride wants her gone because her dress is trashy. But instead of leaving, she hits cancel on a $250,000 payment, bringing the entire fairy tale reception to a screeching halt. What chaos ensued? You have to hear it.
Thank you, Eliza, for this opportunity. It's been a tough road, but I'm here to share my story with strength and clarity. Let me take you back to that moment when love turned into a battle for respect. I never thought $250,000 could feel so light in my hands until the moment I decided to take it all back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when love still felt like enough. My name is Eleni Papadopoulos, and at 55, I thought I understood the weight of sacrifice. My late husband Kostas and I had built our life from nothing, two Greek immigrants who turned a tiny bakery in Queens into something beautiful. We worked 18-hour days, our hands permanently stained with flour, our backs aching from bending over ovens. But we did it with joy because we were building something for our son, Leo. When Kostas died 3 years ago, I thought my world had ended. The bakery felt hollow without his booming laugh echoing off the walls. But Leo, my beautiful boy with his father's kind eyes, he became my reason to keep going. Every dollar I saved, every sacrifice I made, it was all for him. So when he called me on a crisp October evening, his voice bubbling with excitement, announcing his engagement to Marissa Wellington, I felt Kostas's presence in the room. I could almost hear him whispering, "Give our boy the wedding we never had, Agapimou." "Mom, she's incredible," Leo gushed over the phone. "She's everything I've ever wanted. And Mom, I want to give her the wedding of her dreams." I looked around our modest living room at the framed photos of Kostas and me on our own simple wedding day. We'd had 20 guests and a cake from our own bakery. It had been perfect because it was ours, but I wanted more for Leo. "Then we'll give her exactly that," I said, my brown eyes already calculating numbers in my head. "Whatever it takes." I had no idea I was signing my own execution warrant. Meeting Marissa Wellington was like stepping into a magazine spread. Everything about her was perfectly curated, from her platinum blonde hair that never seemed to move to her designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was beautiful in that untouchable way that made you feel slightly apologetic for existing in the same space. Our first meeting was at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a navy blue dress that Kostas had always said brought out my eyes, paired with the pearl necklace he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. I thought I looked elegant. Marissa's expression when she saw me suggested otherwise. "Mrs. Papadopoulos," she said, her voice honeyed but somehow cold. "How lovely to finally meet you. Leo has told me so much about your quaint little bakery." The way she said quaint made it sound like a disease. "Please call me Eleni," I said, embracing her. She tolerated the hug with the stiffness of someone unaccustomed to genuine affection. As we sat down, Marissa immediately launched into her vision for the wedding. "I've been dreaming of this day since I was a little girl," she said, her eyes sparkling with an intensity that should have been my first warning. "I want something absolutely magical, something that will be talked about for years." Leo squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, Marissa has such incredible taste. You should see some of the venues she's shown me." For the next 2 hours, I listened as Marissa outlined her requirements. The Chateau Marmont was too common. The plaza was too obvious. She wanted something unique, something that would photograph beautifully for her social media. She spoke about her wedding like it was a business venture, complete with hashtags and brand partnerships. "Of course, I understand if budget is a concern," she said, her tone suggesting that budget constraints were a personal failing. "Leo mentioned that you might need to be practical about certain elements." Something hot flashed in my chest. "Budget won't be an issue," I heard myself saying. "I want Leo to have everything he deserves." Marissa's smile sharpened. "How wonderful. In that case, I have some ideas that I think you'll find exciting." That was the moment I should have run. Instead, I smiled and asked her to tell me more. The venue Marissa selected was Rosewood Estate, a sprawling vineyard in the Hudson Valley that looked like something from a fairy tale. The price tag was equally fantastical, $75,000 just for the location. For one day. "It's perfect," Marissa breathed as we toured the grounds. "Look at how the light hits the pergola. My photographer says this is the most Instagram-worthy venue in the tri-state area." I watched Leo's face as she spoke. He was looking at her like she was the sun itself, and I felt my resistance crumble. When had I ever been able to deny him anything? The wedding planner Marissa insisted on was Genevieve Hartwell, a woman who spoke in hushed, reverent tones about creating experiences and curating memories. Her initial consultation fee was more than I used to make in a month at the bakery. "Mrs. Papadopoulos," Genevieve said, her clipboard never leaving her hands, "Marissa has exquisite taste. She's envisioning something truly spectacular. I need to know, what's our absolute ceiling for budget? I thought about the life insurance money from Costa's. I thought about the savings account we'd built over 30 years. I thought about the college fund we'd never needed to touch because Leo had earned scholarships. Whatever it takes," I said. "I want this to be perfect." Genevieve's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. The dress shopping expedition was my first real glimpse into Marissa's true nature. We went to Kleinfeld, where she tried on gowns that cost more than cars. Each dress was more elaborate than the last, crystals, beading, trains that required 3 assistants to manage. "What do you think of this one, Eleni?" she asked, spinning in a confection of silk and diamonds that had a price tag of $18,000. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "You look like a princess." "I do, don't I?" She admired herself in the 3-way mirror. "Though I'm wondering if it's special enough. Maybe we should look at the couture collection." When it came time to choose my own dress, I found a lovely emerald green gown that complemented my olive skin and dark hair. It was elegant without being flashy, appropriate for the mother of the groom. Marissa studied me with the intensity of an art critic examining a questionable painting. "That's certainly a choice," she said finally. "It's very bold, very ethnic. Are you sure you don't want something more neutral? Something that won't compete with the bridal party?" The word ethnic hit me like a slap. I looked at myself in the mirror, at my Greek features, my dark brown hair swept into a sophisticated chignon, my brown eyes that held 30 years of hard work and sacrifice. For a moment, I felt ashamed of my own reflection. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly. "Maybe something more subdued." But Leo appeared at that moment, having finished his tuxedo fitting. "Mom, you look incredible," he said, his face lighting up. "That color is perfect on you. Dad would have loved it." I saw Marissa's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, but she smiled. "Of course, if that's what makes you happy." I should have paid attention to that tightness. I should have listened to the warning bells that were starting to chime in my head. Instead, I bought the green dress and told myself I was being oversensitive. The cultural conversations started innocuously enough. Marissa would ask about Greek traditions with the polite interest of someone conducting anthropological research. "So what kinds of things did your family do at weddings?" she asked during one of our planning sessions. I lit up, thinking of my parents' stories, of the celebrations that had shaped my childhood. Oh, there are so many beautiful traditions. The Stefana, the wedding crowns connected by ribbon to symbolize unity. The dance of Isaiah, where the couple walks around the altar 3 times. And the money dance, where guests pin money to the bride and groom for good luck and prosperity. Marissa nodded thoughtfully. "How colorful, but I think for our wedding we want something more universal, more timeless. These ethnic traditions can be so divisive, don't you think? We want all our guests to feel included." My heart sank. Maybe just one small tradition. "The Stefana are so beautiful and they belong to my grandmother. They're family heirlooms." "I appreciate the sentiment," Marissa said, her voice taking on that patient tone people use with children. "But our aesthetic is very clean, very modern. These old-world elements would really clash with our vision." Leo, who had been scrolling through his phone during this conversation, looked up. "Maybe we could do something small, babe, just to honor Dad's memory." For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of genuine anger cross Marissa's face, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Of course we want to honor your father," she said sweetly, "but there are so many ways to do that without making the wedding feel like a theme party." I felt something die inside me. These weren't theme party decorations. They were my heritage, my history, the threads that connected Leo to generations of family he'd never meet. But I swallowed my hurt and nodded. "You're right," I said. "This is your day." The menu was the next battleground. I had hoped to include a few Greek dishes, maybe some spanakopita or baklava for dessert. Traditional foods that would honor Kostas's memory and share our culture with the guests. "The thing is," Marissa explained during our tasting at the 5-star catering company she'd selected, "our guests have very sophisticated palates. They're used to a certain level of refinement. Ethnic foods can be so heavy, so overpowering. We want something light and elegant." I watched her take delicate bites of the proposed menu, seared scallops, truffle risotto, wagyu beef. Everything was beautiful and expensive and completely devoid of soul. What about just the baklava? I asked desperately. It's Leo's favorite dessert. I've been making it for him since he was little. Oh, that's so sweet, Marissa said, her voice dripping with condescension. But we've already ordered the wedding cake from Sylvia Weinstock. It's going to be absolutely stunning, 7 tiers with sugar flowers. Adding other desserts would just confuse the presentation. I looked at Leo, hoping for support, but he was nodding along with everything Marissa said. My son, who used to sneak into the kitchen at 3 in the morning to steal pieces of my baklava, was agreeing that it wasn't good enough for his wedding. The final insult came during the invitation design process. Marissa had chosen elegant cream cardstock with gold foil lettering. Everything was beautiful and tasteful and completely impersonal. We've decided to keep the wording very simple, she explained, showing me the proof. Mr. and Mrs. Wellington request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Marissa Catherine to Leo James Papadopoulos. I stared at the invitation. What about me? What about Costas? Well, traditionally, the bride's family hosts the wedding, Marissa said. Since my parents are contributing to the rehearsal dinner, it makes sense for them to be listed as hosts. But I'm paying for the wedding, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And we're so grateful for your generosity, Marissa said quickly. But having multiple hosts listed would make the invitation look cluttered, less elegant. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Leo by the shoulders and shake him until he remembered who he was, where he came from. Instead, I smiled and nodded and wrote another check. With each compromise, each erasure, I felt myself disappearing. The woman who had built a business from nothing, who had raised a son while working 18-hour days, who had loved a man so deeply that his death nearly broke her, that woman was being systematically deleted from her own son's wedding. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once the wedding was over, once Marissa felt secure in her position as Leo's wife, things would get better. I told myself that love was worth any sacrifice. I had no idea how spectacularly wrong I was. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect October day that makes you believe in magic. I woke up in my hotel room at the Rosewood Estate, my emerald green dress hanging on the closet door like a beautiful accusation. I had spent the previous day in a whirlwind of final preparations. The flowers were perfect, white roses and peonies that cost more than my first car. The string quartet had rehearsed until every note was crystalline. The 7-tier wedding cake from Sylvia Weinstock had arrived like a work of art, each sugar flower so delicate it seemed to breathe. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly what Marissa had envisioned. And somehow, that made it all feel hollow. I took extra care getting ready that morning. My dark brown hair was swept into a sophisticated chignon by the hairstylist Marissa had insisted on for the entire wedding party. My makeup was flawless, highlighting my brown eyes and the olive skin I had once been proud of. The emerald dress fit like it had been made for me, which it essentially had been after 3 rounds of alterations. Looking in the mirror, I felt beautiful. I felt like a woman worthy of respect, worthy of love. I felt like Costas would have been proud to stand beside me. I should have known that feeling wouldn't last. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock in the vineyard's rose garden. Guests began arriving at 3:30, a parade of Marissa's society friends and Leo's college buddies, all dressed in their wedding finest. I recognized maybe a dozen people in the crowd of 200. Out of 200 guests, only 12 were from our side, a stark reminder of how isolated Leo had become from his own heritage. I took my seat in the front row, the leather of the white folding chair cool against my skin. Around me, the vineyard hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle music of the string quartet. Everything was exactly as Marissa had planned it, elegant, sophisticated, and completely impersonal. At exactly 4 o'clock, the music swelled into the bridal march. The wedding party began their procession down the rose-petal-strewn aisle. Marissa's bridesmaids looked like a magazine spread in their matching blush pink gowns. Leo's groomsmen were handsome in their charcoal gray tuxedos. And then came Marissa herself, resplendent in her $18,000 gown, her veil trailing behind her like a cloud. She looked every inch the fairy tale princess she had always wanted to be. The guests gasped audibly at her beauty, and I found myself gasping too. Whatever else I thought about her, she was stunning. But it was Leo who took my breath away. My son stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair slicked back, his face glowing with happiness. For a moment, he looked exactly like his father on our wedding day, young and hopeful and full of love. The ceremony began with all the traditional elements Marissa had insisted upon. No Greek traditions, no acknowledgement of Leo's heritage, nothing that might make the sophisticated guests uncomfortable. The officiants spoke about love and commitment in the generic terms that could apply to any couple. I tried to focus on the beauty of the moment, on the joy on my son's face. I tried to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest, the sense that I was watching strangers perform a play about love. The vows were perfectly written, probably by a professional. Leo spoke about finding his soulmate, about building a future filled with adventure and growth. Marissa talked about partnership and shared dreams and creating a life of purpose together. The words were beautiful and meaningless, like expensive wallpaper covering cracks in the wall. And then they were pronounced husband and wife. Leo kissed his bride as the guests erupted in applause, the string quartet launched into a triumphant recessional, and rose petals fell like snow around the happy couple. It should have been the perfect ending to a perfect ceremony. Instead, it was the moment my world exploded. My phone buzzed in my small clutch purse. I almost ignored it. Who would be texting during the ceremony? But something made me look. The message was from Leo. My son had texted me from the altar, while rose petals were still falling around him, while guests were still applauding his happiness. The words on the screen hit me like a physical blow. Marissa says your dress is trashy and wants you gone before the reception. I read it twice, 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood. But there it was, in black and white, sent from my son's phone while he was still holding his new wife's hand. Not only had Marissa found my dress, the dress I had agonized over, the dress that made me feel beautiful, trashy, but she wanted me gone. Not just moved to a different table, not just asked to change clothes. Gone, erased, deleted from my own son's wedding reception. And Leo, my Leo, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, had agreed to be her messenger. I looked up at the altar where the happy couple was posing for photos. Leo caught my eye for just a moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, shame, or just annoyance that I hadn't immediately complied with his wife's demands? In that moment, 30 years of love and sacrifice crystallized into something sharp and unforgiving. I wasn't angry. Anger was too hot, too chaotic for what I was feeling. I was cold. I was clear. I was done. I smiled. Not the broken smile of a woman trying to keep the peace, but the serene smile of someone who had just found perfect clarity. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The beauty of modern banking is its simplicity. 3 taps on my phone screen, and I could undo months of financial planning. I had specifically arranged for the final wire transfer, the remaining balance of nearly $50,000 for all outstanding vendor payments, to be pending until 5 o'clock, right before the reception began. This flexibility had been my insurance policy in case of last-minute changes. I never imagined I'd use it like this. I thought about the $250,000 I had already spent. $75,000 for the venue, $50,000 for catering, $20,000 for photography, $15,000 for flowers, $18,000 for Marissa's dress, $12,000 for the string quartet. All of it paid for with my money, my sacrifice, my love for a son who had just ordered me to leave his wedding because his new wife thought my dress was trashy. The irony was exquisite. Marissa wanted me gone because of how I looked, but she had no idea that I was the only thing standing between her perfect wedding and complete financial collapse. I tapped Cancel Payment. The confirmation screen appeared instantly. Payment stopped. I took a screenshot, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I had just done. Around me, guests were beginning to move toward the reception hall, chattering excitedly about the beautiful ceremony and the evening to come. The string quartet was packing up their instruments before moving to the cocktail area. Servers were circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people spent on lunch. None of them knew that in approximately 15 minutes, when the vendors tried to process their final payments, the entire elaborate facade would come crashing down. I stood up from my front row seat, smoothing my emerald green dress, my apparently trashy ethnic dress that had cost more than most people's monthly salary. I walked with purpose toward the reception area, where Genevieve Hartwell was orchestrating the pre-dinner festivities with military precision. Genevieve was everything a high-end wedding planner should be, impeccably dressed, utterly professional, and completely focused on executing her client's vision flawlessly. She had coordinated dozens of weddings that cost more than most people's houses. She had handled bridezillas, demanding mothers-in-law, and every conceivable crisis that could befall a luxury wedding. She had never handled anything like what I was about to do to her. "Genevieve," I said, approaching her station near the entrance to the reception hall, "I need to speak with you for a moment." She looked up from her clipboard, her smile bright and professional. "Eleni, wasn't the ceremony beautiful?" Marissa looked absolutely radiant. "We're just about to begin cocktail hour and then, I'm afraid there's been a change," I said, my voice calm and steady. "We have a slight problem with the payments." Genevieve's smile faltered slightly. In her world, payment problems were the stuff of nightmares. "What kind of problem? I thought everything was settled." "I need you to see this," I said, holding up my phone with the screenshot of the canceled payment. Genevieve stared at the screen for a long moment, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. When she looked up at me, her professional composure was cracking around the edges. "I don't understand," she said. "This shows a canceled payment for, oh my God, this is the final vendor payment. This is everyone's final payment." "That's correct," I said, "but why would you? When did you? I don't understand what's happening here." "It's quite simple," I said, my voice still perfectly calm. "I've been asked to leave the reception because my dress is inappropriate. Since I won't be staying to enjoy the party I paid for, I saw no reason to continue funding it. I won't fund my own disrespect." Genevieve's face went white. "You can't be serious. The vendors are expecting payment. The catering staff, the musicians, the photographer, everyone is expecting to be paid tonight." "Then I suggest you inform them of the change in circumstances," I said. I watched as the full implications hit her. This wasn't just about my personal payment. This was about every vendor, every service provider, every person who had worked to make this wedding perfect. Without that final payment, none of them would be paid. And in the wedding industry, that meant they would stop working immediately. Genevieve grabbed her headset and began speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught fragments. "Payment issue, need to verify, hold everything." The first sign that something was wrong came from the string quartet. They had been setting up in the cocktail area, preparing to provide elegant background music for the pre-dinner mingling. Suddenly, the violinist stopped tuning her instrument and walked over to speak with the other musicians. There was a brief, intense conversation, and then they began packing up their instruments. Guests started to notice. Conversations faltered as people watched the musicians leave. Someone asked a server what was happening, but the server just shrugged and kept walking. The champagne fountain was next. The elaborate three-tier crystal fountain had been the centerpiece of the cocktail hour, surrounded by towers of champagne flutes and garnished with floating rose petals. The catering manager appeared beside it with a worried expression, spoke briefly into his radio, and then, decisively, dramatically, turned off the fountain. The champagne stopped flowing. The elegant cascade became a trickle, then nothing. Guests began to murmur more loudly. This wasn't the kind of thing that happened at high-end weddings. These were people accustomed to flawless service, to events that ran like clockwork. Seeing vendors pack up and champagne fountains shut down was like watching the laws of physics break down. But the most spectacular moment was yet to come. The wedding cake had been positioned in the reception hall like a work of art. 7 tiers of architectural perfection, decorated with sugar flowers so delicate they looked real. It had taken a team of bakers 3 days to create, and it was worth every penny of its astronomical price tag. 2 members of the catering staff appeared beside the cake with a wheeled cart. One of them, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, began carefully dismantling the elaborate display around the cake's base. "Excuse me," a guest said, approaching them. "What are you doing with the cake?" The catering staff member looked up, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we have to remove the cake. There's been a payment issue." The guests stared at him in disbelief. "You're taking the wedding cake?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm very sorry." And with that, they began wheeling the 7-tier masterpiece toward the service exit. The cake that was supposed to be the centerpiece of the reception, the sweet ending to a perfect day, was being repossessed like a car with missed payments. The reaction was immediate and electric. Guests stopped pretending to ignore what was happening and began openly staring. Conversations died as people watched the cake disappear. Someone pulled out their phone and started recording. Multiple guests were now filming, capturing the moment for social media, their shocked whispers creating a buzz that would later explode online. The DJ, who had been setting up for the grand entrance of the bride and groom, received word through his headset. The upbeat music that had been playing during cocktail hour cut off abruptly, leaving the reception area in an eerie, uncomfortable silence. Into that silence walked Leo and Marissa, fresh from their photo session, expecting to make their triumphant entrance as husband and wife. Instead, they walked into a scene of barely controlled chaos. Marissa's face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if they weren't so telling. Confusion as she took in the silent room and missing vendors. Annoyance as she realized something had gone wrong with her perfect plan. And then, as the full scope of the disaster became clear, pure rage. "What the hell is going on?" she shrieked, her voice echoing unnaturally in the silent reception hall. "Where is everyone? Where's the music? Where's my cake?" Genevieve appeared at her side, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past 15 minutes. "Marissa, I'm so sorry, there's been a payment issue. The vendors, they can't continue without confirmation of payment." "Payment issue?" Marissa's voice rose to a pitch that probably scared wildlife. "What kind of payment issue? Everything was supposed to be handled." That's when Leo finally looked at me, really looked at me, standing calmly near the entrance in my emerald green dress, watching the collapse of his wedding reception with serene detachment. His face went pale as understanding dawned. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't say a word. I simply gave him a small, polite nod, the kind you might give to a stranger you passed on the street. Then I turned and walked toward the exit, my head held high, my posture perfect. Behind me, I could hear Marissa's voice rising to a shriek. "This is sabotage. This is insane. Someone fix this right now." But I was already walking away, stepping out into the cool October evening, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in months. The sound of guests, shocked voices, and the chaos I'd left behind followed me into the parking lot, but I didn't look back. I had destroyed more than just a wedding reception. I had shattered Leo's social standing in front of 200 of his and Marissa's closest friends and family. The humiliation would follow them for years. The drive home from the Rosewood estate was the most peaceful hour I'd experienced in years. As I navigated the winding roads of the Hudson Valley, my phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts that I ignored. The setting sun painted the autumn leaves in shades of gold and crimson, and for the first time in months, I actually noticed their beauty. I thought about Costas as I drove. How proud he had been of Leo, how much he had loved our son's gentle nature and kind heart. But I also remembered something else about my husband, his fierce protection of our family's dignity. Costas would never have tolerated anyone treating me the way Marissa had. He would never have stood silently while someone erased our heritage, our history, our worth. And he certainly would never have sent me a text message ordering me to leave our son's wedding because my dress was trashy. When I finally arrived home, I poured myself a glass of the good wine, the bottle Costas and I had been saving for a special occasion that never came. I sat in our living room, surrounded by photos of our life together, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was free. For months, I had been slowly disappearing, allowing myself to be erased one tradition at a time, one compromise at a time. I had told myself it was love, that sacrifice was what mothers did. But what I had actually been doing was teaching my son that I had no value, that my feelings didn't matter, that my heritage was something to be ashamed of. I had been complicit in my own erasure. The phone calls started around 8 o'clock. First Leo, then Marissa, then Leo again. I let them all go to voicemail. Whatever they had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it. Maybe I never would be. The text messages were more illuminating. Leo's were frantic, desperate. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk. This is crazy. Please." Marissa's were angry and accusatory. "This is vindictive and cruel. You've ruined the most important day of my life. I hope you're proud of yourself." But it was the message from Genevieve that told me everything I needed to know about the aftermath. "Eleni, I understand you're upset, but we need to resolve this immediately. The vendors are threatening to sue. The guests are leaving. This is a disaster." Good, I thought. Let it be a disaster. Let them see what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. The next morning brought a knock at my door. I opened it to find Leo standing on my front porch, still wearing his tuxedo pants and white dress shirt from the night before. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and tears. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "please, we need to talk." I looked at my son, this man I had loved more than my own life, who had reduced me to a text message dismissal, and felt nothing but tired sadness. "Come in," I said. He followed me to the kitchen where I poured myself coffee and didn't offer him any. We sat across from each other at the table where I had helped him with homework, where we had shared countless meals, where we had planned his future. "I don't understand," he said finally. "Why would you do this? Why would you humiliate us like that?" The question was so perfectly Leo, focused entirely on his own embarrassment, with no awareness of what had led to this moment. "Tell me about the text message," I said calmly, his face flushed. I shouldn't have sent that, but Marissa was upset and I thought maybe if you just left quietly, we could talk about it later. She called my dress trashy. She didn't mean it like that. She was just stressed about the photos and she's been erasing me from your wedding for months, Leo. The traditions, the food, the invitations, she systematically removed every trace of your father's heritage, of our family, of me, and you let her. "That's not how it was," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then how was it?" I asked. "Explain to me how asking your mother to leave your wedding reception because her dress is inappropriate is not exactly how it was." He was quiet for a long moment. "I thought you would understand. I thought you would want me to be happy." "I wanted you to be happy more than I wanted to breathe," I said. "I gave you everything. I gave you $250,000 for a wedding that erased everything your father and I built. I let your wife insult me, dismiss me, and treat me like an embarrassment. I did it all because I thought that's what love looked like." "It is love," he said desperately. "You're my mother. You're supposed to support me no matter what." And there it was, the entitled assumption that had been lurking beneath everything. That my love was unconditional and therefore worthless. That I would accept any treatment, any humiliation, any erasure because I was his mother and that's what mothers did. "No," I said quietly. "Love is supposed to be reciprocal. Love is supposed to include respect. Love is supposed to protect the people who matter to you, not throw them away when they become inconvenient." "I never threw you away," he protested. "You texted me from the altar to tell me to leave," I said. "You couldn't even be bothered to speak to me face to face. You made me a text message, Leo, a text message." He started crying then, not the dignified tears of a grown man, but the messy, desperate sobs of a child who had finally realized the magnitude of his mistake. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I love you. I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked at my son, my beautiful, broken son who had learned to value the wrong things, and felt my heart crack open. Not with anger anymore, but with grief. Grief for the relationship we'd lost, for the man I'd hoped he would become, for the family Costas and I had tried to build. "I love you too," I said, "but love isn't enough anymore. Respect isn't negotiable. Dignity isn't optional, and I won't be erased from my own life to make someone else comfortable." "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means you have a choice to make," I said. "You can have a marriage built on the erasure of everything that came before her, or you can have a relationship with me, but you can't have both." He stared at me in shock. "You're giving me an ultimatum?" "I'm giving you clarity," I said. "I'm done pretending that being treated badly is the same thing as being loved." 6 months later, I sold the bakery. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The space that had once been filled with Costas's laughter and Leo's childhood memories had become a monument to a life I was ready to leave behind. I used the money to buy a small house in Astoria, in the heart of the Greek community where I should have stayed all along. My neighbors understood the weight of tradition, the importance of heritage, the value of respect. They welcomed me not as someone's mother or someone's wife, but as Eleni, a woman with her own story, her own worth, her own life to live. I started teaching cooking classes in my new kitchen, sharing the recipes Costas and I had perfected over 30 years. Young Greek-American women came to learn how to make their grandmother's dishes, and I taught them more than cooking. I taught them that their heritage was something to be proud of, that traditions weren't obstacles to overcome, but gifts to cherish. Leo called sometimes, not often, but sometimes. The conversations were stilted, careful, full of the things we couldn't say. He never apologized for the text message. He never acknowledged what Marissa had done. He never asked about the traditions he had rejected or the heritage he had abandoned. But he called, and I answered, and we talked about safe things like weather and work and the careful choreography of a relationship that had been broken and badly mended. Marissa never called. I didn't expect her to. I heard through mutual friends that their marriage was struggling. The fairy tale wedding had been followed by a reality that was apparently less magical than she had anticipated. Without the distraction of wedding planning, they had been forced to confront the fact that they had very little in common beyond a shared love of expensive things and social media attention. The story of their wedding had indeed gone viral, just as Marissa had always dreamed, but not in the way she'd hoped. Videos from guests had spread across social media platforms with hashtags like wedding fail and mom revenge. The incident became a cautionary tale about family respect, with thousands of comments from viewers sharing their own stories of being mistreated by in-laws or ungrateful children. I felt no satisfaction in their problems. I felt no vindication in their struggles. I felt nothing at all, which was perhaps the most telling response of all. The story of the wedding became legend in certain circles. The mother's revenge, some people called it, the $250,000 text message. It was shared on social media, discussed in wedding planning forums, used as a cautionary tale about the importance of treating family with respect. Wedding planners now included clauses in their contracts about payment security and family dynamics. But for me, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my worth. I had reclaimed my right to be treated with respect by the people who claimed to love me. And on quiet evenings in my new kitchen, when the light slanted through the windows and filled the room with gold, I could swear I heard Costa's laughing. Not the bitter laughter of vindication, but the warm, proud laughter of a man whose wife had finally remembered who she was. The $250,000 I had spent on Leo's wedding was the best money I ever invested. Not because it bought him happiness. It didn't. Not because it created the perfect day. It didn't do that either. It was the best money I ever spent because it bought me my freedom. It bought me the clarity to see that love without respect is not love at all. It bought me the courage to walk away from a relationship that was slowly killing the woman I used to be. And in the end, it bought me back myself. Some people might say I destroyed my son's wedding over a text message, but I know the truth. I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken. I simply stopped pretending that broken things were whole, that disrespect was love, that my erasure was the price of my son's happiness. I stopped the payment because I finally understood that some things, dignity, respect, self-worth, are not for sale at any price. Not even $250,000, not even for love.
Eleni Papadopoulos, thank you for your raw honesty in revealing how a mother's sacrifice can be exploited until dignity demands action. This story uniquely teaches that allowing cultural and personal erasure in the name of love only breeds resentment, urging us to prioritize self-respect in family dynamics. It's a powerful reminder that true bonds require mutual honor. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.